those services for that particular portion of the community.
The concept behind the CFD is that as a new residential unit comes online, they support their own public safety cost. So when this CFD was established, there was a study done that calculated how much each unit in housing requires in public safety costs, whether it be a portion of a policeman or a fireman, whatever it may be, and what costs they incur to the city. And then the city made a decision as to whether they wanted to fully fund that cost through the CFD or only a part of it. And at that time, the city decided to only fund a portion of it. That's why this general fund must contribute such a large portion to it. And that's why, stepping a little beyond the CFD, that the sales tax measure was passed to cover more of that cost. This CFD does not cover the cost for the housing. This contributes to it.
I'm sorry, could you just say that last line you said?
I said, based on the presumptions that were made when the CFD was put in place, this CFD does not cover the cost of all public safety services to each home. It contributes to the cost, does not cover it.
So currently, just to give you an idea, the public safety CFD covers the full-time salary and benefits of approximately 2 officers and 1 firefighter. That's it.
So the point that I'm making about this is that we're putting the burden on property owners, the tax burden on the property owners, as opposed to Measure U, as a consumption tax, puts the burden across the board to everybody that buys anything within the city of Hemet. Well, that fall under the items that get taxed. So and I understand that it doesn't cover the full cost. It's not a fully burdened cost, and I get that. But again, it goes back to we're specifically targeting property owners to pay this burden as opposed to spreading this across the entire city. Because I don't have this CFD at my house. I'm sure Carly doesn't have this CFD at her house. This isn't a blanket-wide CFD that covers the entire city to pay for public safety. It's only targeting new construction built after 2005. So now and this goes back to the conversation that we had at the last council meeting when we talked about building code update. We're adding to the cost of already high-cost homes, and we have a housing crisis, and this is going to add to the cost of homes and getting people into homes. And we're just putting that burden on homeownership. Measure U is the answer to that.
No.
Measure U is used for public safety, and that's why it was passed. Because there was a need. Because the CFD doesn't cover fully burdened public safety. And I'm aware of that. That's why there wasn't another CFD put on property owners and make property owners pay for public safety. Everybody has to pay for it because a majority of property owners do not use the resources of public safety for the most part. It's non-property owners. Everybody uses it, but property owners, if you do a study, if you do research on who calls on public safety services, property owners are typically not heavy burden using of public safety. It's people that are out and about or non-property owners that burden public safety services more, and that's just fact. If you were to get stats from our police department and look at how many calls for service come to rental properties in the city, you will find that they far exceed the number of calls for service to properties that are owner-occupied properties. But anyway, that's beside the point. The point is that this just adds to the cost of our already high cost of housing in California.
So any new development is going to be charged at the same thing.
Right, but none of the older developments, anything built before 2005 doesn't have this. But we now have Measure U to pay for public safety, to add and boost public safety.
May I ask staff if this is a standard practice statewide?
state this statistically. I haven't counted all the cities, but I can tell you from being a consultant to several different cities that yes, most have a public safety CFD. The same issues you raise has been raised at other cities as to who should pay for it, but most of the cities I've dealt with, and again, that is not I can't say it's statistically correct across the state, I do have a public safety CFD or some form of district to fund it. That's the best I could answer at this point.
So, no, I was going to say.
It certainly does. I mean, you've raised an interesting perspective that perhaps we hadn't necessarily considered before. But in the grand scheme of things, anybody that moves through the city of Hemet, anybody that lives or operates a business in the city of Hemet, is potentially a consumer of public safety services, whether they're directly calling 911 or they're receiving the benefit of the resources availability and the response time and the preventive patrol, certainly the police do. So
Just driving through.
people drive, that's true. So it's really difficult to quantify and put a price tag on a particular consumer of public safety services, much like, and I guess it would be easier to quantify people that are consuming utilities, because that's measurable, and people that have refuse services, that's measurable and quantifiable. But public safety services are so abstract that I think that's why we're struggling to try to quantify, is this a reasonable fee for the potential burden on those public safety services.
Well, my question would be, does that mean every new development will have a CFD for public safety?
Let me ask maybe a different question. Is part of the concept behind a CFD to anticipate future expansion, such as the establishment of an additional fire station in proximity to that CFD?
And there is the expectation that the city's sixth fire station will go in that vicinity. We do have a deposit that was received by the previous developer before they filed for bankruptcy of about $3 million.
So theoretically, that development could receive the direct benefit of a future fire station.
Yes.
That would be in closer proximity, give them a better response time, so the money would go towards that objective.
Yes, and as far as your question about will all new developments be covered by that, I don't know that all of them will, but I know that for this specific development, it was a condition of approval.
Okay, well then, if that was a condition of approval, then that
And,
puts it in.
yeah, and Mayor and
That
Council,
means we don't have to vote tonight?
When this was put in place in 2005, the city was going through a very large growth spurt, big expansion, and the council and management at the time determined that a CFD that would annex in new development as they came along post that time was a reasonable way to help pay for the expansion of police services that would be necessary to cover those facilities. There wasn't any contemplation of a tax measure at that time. I can't speak to how that might have changed the direction, but at the time, it was anticipated that each new, certainly residential development, would be annexed into the public safety CFD. There might have been exceptions for size or something. I'd have to review it. It's been quite a number of years. But that was the original intention. The thought was they had the core that the general fund was already paying for, and as each new development came along, each new development was either going to use public safety services or benefit from the fact that there were public safety services in the city, and they should pay some portion of that to offset the cost.
The other side of it too is, as it relates to McSweeney, although Lorena did mention the balance that is in that account, it's nowhere near the level to be able to operationally provide that fire station to the community. So even the use of Measure U to potentially fund that fire station, or the balance it would need to remain operational in the future, would be really, I haven't done the math on it, but that puts some significant burdens on that cost. And so even though we've accrued that balance, the thought being, as more individuals purchase into that tract, that they do help subsidize or pay for that cost of, whether it's an additional fire station or additional police officers, that could obviously be in tandem with Measure U. Measure U does have an expiration and a sunset, so if that were to be gone, obviously this is the one partial factor that could be used to help expand public safety services for the city of Hemet.
My question is, how does this help the developer in marketing his homes? Move to McSweeney Farms, you can pay extra for the same that I don't pay for. You see what I'm saying?
Well, they're upfront with the information that's provided.
And Russ, you have it at Four Seasons too?
Yes.
The CFD for public safety?
Yeah.
Which is very ironic, because most of the communities new that have the CFD also are gated and have their own private security that they pay extra for.
That works. Nice.
I believe it was an item that was negotiated with the developer of McSweeney Farms, and I believe there's a reference and a requirement in the development agreement that was done that they join the public safety CFD.
So you made a comment, I'm sorry, you put your realtor hat on, now put your city council hat on.
Well,
What do you
it
do
puts
with
me
this?
between a rock and a hard place, because I'm not for adding an additional tax to make the cost of housing go up. I understand that we have a need for public safety, and I'm still 100% an advocate for public safety in the city of Emmett. But again, I'm not for increasing the cost of housing, because housing in California is a crisis. We hear people complain about the homeless. We hear people complain about the cost of housing in California. People don't have a place to live, and yet we're just adding more to drive the cost up. It's just, that's the reality.
But that cost can't continue to be a burden on the city.
Well, see, the problem is that the state of California doesn't help us any, because they're shifting the burden to the cities.
The rock and the hard place is with the state of California.
Well, totally. So the people need to stop voting for the people that are in Sacramento.
But the other hard thing is that we're, a few communities are paying extra for public safety, and my neighborhood doesn't. Your neighborhood doesn't. Yours probably doesn't either, right? And so it's just about
But
fairness.
it wasn't as much of an issue way back, in before 2000. So,
Well, like the city attorney stated, this was done back in 2005 at the height of the market, and then 2 years later, the market crashes. And how much development have we had since 2007? Not a whole lot. Well, and I've had the same conversation at one of our regional boards when they decided to raise the cost of dip fees pennies. But when you've got one regional raising it pennies and you've got another regional raising it pennies, you've got building costs going up, you've got a CFD added, multiple CFDs, because this isn't the only CFD in McSweeney. It's just another.
But adding taxes, not encouraging growth.
Okay. It's been
So I'm glad I said that, Richard.
It's been an enlightening discussion. We do have an affirmative vote from the property representative, so I think I'll call for the question. We have a motion for item 9B.
And I will make the motion to adopt the resolution of the City Council, wherever it is, number 1, 2, and 3.
Is there a second?
well, I'll second that because there's no real alternative at this point. And since the property owner has agreed to this and the current property owners there are doing so as well, and we certainly have to have it covered by public safety. So until the state of California gets their act together, we need to do.
May I have a motion and a second for approval? Please vote. Motion passes 3-2.
Thank you, council.
Thank you very much, staff. On to discussion and action items. Item 10A, consideration of appointments to the City Council subcommittees, ad hoc committees, and regional committees for 2020. So in your packet, we have the list of 2019 council member assignments and some opportunity for 2020 assignment recommendations.
I would like to advocate for being on the council advisory, since it was a item that I started last year and hope to have it implemented then. So I would like to be on that ad hoc committee.
Let me find my worksheet here.
No, it's okay, I just didn't see it. The next one.
The council advisory.
What? Yeah. So let's maybe just go down from top to bottom. The Hemet Housing Authority, I think we already took action on that at a previous meeting. So that one's okay. Investment Oversight Committee. You okay? All right, that's all right. And the Public Library Board of Trustees.
I've been asked to stay on that, the library.
Okay. The Infrastructure Commission, that is going to be a new commission, and I've asked to. Yeah, I'm just working down the sheet here. So, would anyone be interested in being an alternate to the Infrastructure Commission once it's formed?
I think Mike would.
That was who I was thinking of.
See? Mayor's thinking of you.
Only because this is going to be combining the roles of what was the Traffic and Parking Commission and Parks.
Yes. Mike is saying yes.
What?
He's an alternate to what? I mean, to who?
To me.
Infrastructure Commission, yes. Yes.
Was that a yes from? Yeah. Okay, thank you. And Planning Commission, any changes?
Are you okay with that, Mike? First and second?
You're going to do the first Tuesday,
Whatever you want. I don't care.
the third Tuesday?
Yeah. So that's how we did it last year. I'll take the first Tuesday. Michael will take the third Tuesday.
Did you get that? Okay. And CDBG ad hoc committee. I think we just established that at a recent council meeting. So
But it wasn't in 2191.
yeah, okay. Yeah. One too many digits there. And Florida Avenue, State Route 74. Staying on that?
Yes, there's still some things to do.
Okay. Homeless Task Force.
That's fine.
You're on there too.
Run it. I just attend.
Well, I thought you were co-chair.
Oh. I'm vice chair.
Should we add Councilmember or Mayor Pro Tem Krupa to that? Okay.
Mayor, that
The homeless committees originally started out as a project of the mayor at the time, and it wasn't necessarily an ad hoc. If you're going to assign council members to it now, it's clearly got ongoing,
You know, that's a good point.
it should be a standing committee.
That initial thought was when we were looking into solutions for change and how that would work in this community. Since that wasn't accepted as a alternative, which is exactly why the committee was formed, then it's up to council, up to mayor to decide whether or not he still wants that committee.
And Mary, the council would have to decide on what the, either specific project that group is going to work on, if it's going to be an ad hoc committee, or if it's going to have ongoing jurisdiction over what. If it does, then it's a standing committee and would have to follow that.
Well, the interesting thing too, as well, since what is different now is that we are a part of the 3rd District homeless consortium that we weren't before. So,
Maybe we should make it a representative to that consortium and change the title.
well, the problem, and the only problem with that is somewhere along the line, unless we just have council discussion about it, the information we get from that task force, from the county task force, that definitely impacts what happens in Hemet, needs to be discussed and vetted through those people that are interested, to keep informed, and obviously the county can do a lot more than we can at this point, and so to be able to be a part of that consortium that we weren't before, and specifically to this area and not regional as the other ones are, it's important that information be distributed or at least presented to the community as to what's happening.
What the county's doing.
Now, you know, you can do that by having a town hall every once in a while. But
Why don't we just table this one and or we can let the ad hoc task force expire and bring it back for future consideration along the lines of what Bonnie's suggesting.
And another thing that we could do is, even if we combine the things that we do and kind of just keep moving forward and keep communicating with the groups and even establishing, because I think establishing guidelines, we haven't done that. It's one of the things that we're trying to work on for, what was that, having robust rules for vagrants and stuff. And I think that some of that could come under that committee.
well, you know, the interesting thing is, people don't feel that the task force was of any value. However, every task force meeting we had, information was shared, and there was a lot more that every one of us learned than we would have otherwise. And each participant took things back to their respective agencies to share that information. So it wasn't useless to have it. It was just the original intent did not come to fruition. However, good information is always shared at those meetings, and so there was a reason to have them. We just need to refocus and figure out, as being part of the 3rd District Task Force, how that best serves and how we can best get the information out to the public.
And I think it's important to keep this, because we have a lot of people in the community that are, step up and do things and go out on the streets, and it would be good as the city being a leader you know what I'm saying, with this homeless stuff, because offering training and times for teams to go out and do things is so important, but we want the teams to all be on the same page. And so getting everybody on the same page is the hardest part. And so keeping something like this in place is important. That's what I try to do with our homeless outreach team.
And this has been a repository, so to speak, for all of the churches in the valley and the Interfaith Council, and not only that, but for the ROCKS team, Lieutenant Dixon and his guys to come in and keep everybody informed as to what is happening. So I think it definitely serves a purpose, and it should continue.
And I've met with other homeless task force in other cities and outreach teams, and they actually have volunteers that are on call that would show up for a cleanup when the ROCKS guys have something, that cleans up, or, if there's women that are in trouble or things like that, that we could, go down a different road. There's a lot of things that we could do.
I'm hearing a preference to retain the homeless task force if we go that direction. Is it still?
If you set it up as a standing committee, then you're going to appoint 2 council members to it. They can invite whoever they want to or disseminate whatever information they want. And a standing committee has ongoing jurisdiction that's much broader than an ad hoc. And so it would probably give them much more flexibility, even though you got to comply with the Brown Act and have a noticed meeting and opportunity for public comment. It would give you a much broader scope.
So with this agenda item, we would have the latitude to modify this from an ad hoc to a standing?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sensing that that's the preference of council. So if we make it a standing committee, Carly, would you like to continue participating? I think it would be. Yeah.
That's only if Linda's done, because I go with some others, so yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so Bonnie and Carly. All right. And so we'll modify that to a standing committee. Okay, we have the Skate Plaza Task Force.
That's all Bonnie.
Okay, so this is really great because, as mentioned the latter part of last year, we're at a point where we need to move forward, and we're regrouping because Chris Jensen left, so she was the...
Charles is up there.
But Charles is here. Charles, you're the regroup. And so,
Charles.
we need to keep this going. I mean, we're at a point now that we have a feasibility study, we can start looking for external funding for that, for the park. And so we need to keep it going and reestablish a committee for that.
Okay, so you're advocating that we make that a standing committee.
Yeah.
Because once the project's completed, there's always going to be ongoing oversight and maintenance.
Oh, there's, a lot of stuff that we need to consider, so, with regards to that. But, like I said, if we've gone this long, this far, and now we're to a point where we can go further because of what we've done.
So we want to convert that to a standing committee.
If that's what we need to do.
Okay. So you want to stay on it? Any other council members want to? Any other council members want to be on it? There you go.
She's going to work harder than ever.
Yeah.
That should be a full-time director.
Okay. Anyone else would like to join Councilmember Wright on that?
You're putting it over at Gable Park, right? That's
Well,
the plan?
You were supposed to be on it.
Well,
You never showed up.
There you go.
you're always hanging on nights I couldn't.
Michael
Well,
needs
there you go. I can only do it at night.
Do I hear a sound of a volunteer?
It should, it's
Okay.
in his district. He should do
Okay.
it. He should be on it.
Okay.
This is fun.
Guess what?
All right.
One more.
We're on to liaison to outside organizations. We have Riverside County Airport Land Use Commission. You want to keep that?
Yeah, I'm appointed to that by something other than this council. Mayors, through the League of Cities, it's the mayors something.
Okay.
They appoint, that's who appointed me to that.
Okay.
Yes, so yes, I'm staying on that.
Okay. Community Action Commission of Riverside County. I don't even know what that is. Says there's nobody assigned.
I thought Carly and Mike were assigned to that.
That was that new thing.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to keep it? So. Okay. And you want to be alternate, Mike? Okay.
Sure.
I know.
Who says the draft is dead? League of California Cities, we have Krupa and Wright.
And we should all be on that.
Yeah.
Because the city belongs to the California League of Cities, and meetings monthly, every other monthly meeting is open to everybody.
Yeah.
There's 3 of us that are on policy committees, but everybody.
Still on taxation, revenue,
Yeah.
taxation.
And
I'm on
I
a different committee, but
Yeah.
not public safety anymore.
I'll
But
be up there next week.
Me too.
me too. Okay, so I guess we can show all of us on that one.
Yes.
Okay. RCTC.
Yes, I want to keep that, please.
Okay, and I'll continue to be your alternate. And Riverside County Habitat Conservation Agency, we'd love hearing.
Yeah, we made some great progress, and my job there's done.
Oh, are they ready to?
Nice try.
No, she needs to stay there.
I mean, we need to hear about the species of the month and,
Well, that's him.
oh, that's,
That's him. She's our CHCA.
oh, okay.
Oh, am I on the wrong one? Oh, whoops.
And then you have a report for that too.
Okay, so right now we have Meyer and Percival. We want to keep that okay?
I think he wants to be the lead now, because I've been the lead for 2 years, and I feel like I'm hogging the position.
But that's good.
Maybe you want it, Russ. What do you feel on that? I'll be your alternate.
I haven't heard your name come up in the.
Yeah. My name's in there.
Once.
No. Okay, I'll be an alternate to that. How's that?
I'm going to be the alternate. I've already done it 2 years. Love those little guys.
All right.
Those little rats.
All right. I'll step up on that one.
You're awesome, Russ.
And Carly will be the alternate. Okay. Riverside Transit Agency,
Yes.
Krupa and Percival.
I'm okay with that. If you're okay with that.
He pays better than RC now.
Well, there's always that.
Okay. And then Riverside Conservation Authority, RCA.
That's it.
And there is no species.
And somebody else
And-
could be the alternate on that if you want. Somebody else want to, Carly, you could be the alternate on that. It'd fit right in.
Oh, I
Everything you learned at our CHCA.
Don't miss Mike.
Yes, I will if you want.
Okay. We'll ask. Okay, so that's Percival and Myers, Ramona Bowl. Any change?
No. We're good.
Okay. Water Master Board. You okay with that?
Yep.
Okay, see, my name's on that one too. WCE. Now, Bonnie and I had already had a conversation, and
We're gonna switch roles.
we're going to switch roles, so I'll be the primary and you'll be the alternate.
Right. Seeing how there anyway.
And WRCOG.
Well, I'm chairman, you're not sure about that.
Nope. So, that one's okay as is?
Yep.
So you guys talked me into adding my name. My name's all down at the bottom here. Okay, that covers all of those committees and liaisons to outside organizations. So, the recommendation is to appoint council representatives and alternates to those positions. And do you want to give a staff report on this at all, or have we covered everything?
Yeah, you've covered everything.
Okay. Do we have any requests from the public to speak on this item?
No, there are no requests to speak.
Okay. So with that, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, please vote. That passes unanimously. Thank you for your participation in that. Item 10B, resolution establishing a policy to redefine the appointment process for citizen advisory boards and form a council ad hoc committee to appoint members to the Infrastructure Commission. Like we have our city manager going to give us the staff report on this.
Talk about the sausage being made, huh?
Yeah.
Pretty good.
That was.
Okay, so for item 10B, a resolution establishing a policy to redefine the appointment process for citizen advisory boards and form a council ad hoc committee to appoint members to the Infrastructure Commission. So some background on this item. Council directed staff to develop an amended appointment process for the city's advisory boards on October 22nd, 2019. Council provided their input to staff at that council meeting, as well as some other follow-up emails to the city manager's office. The existing process as it is now, council members individually select candidates and provide them to the council for approval. So based on the input from the council meeting at that night, as well as follow-up discussions through email with council, the recommendation was that the council select an ad hoc committee to appoint members to the commission. So in process, the council will select 2 of its members to serve on an ad hoc committee for each selection. At the conclusion of each term, the ad hoc will convene to consider all applications. When the council protocols are redrafted and adopted by the council, which I believe you have a draft version of them from the city attorney, this policy will be incorporated into them in a comprehensive protocol for the council. So the consideration for the council is to establish a uniform term expiration, and then additionally, the council would only need to appoint an ad hoc committee once a year instead of at the various expirations that currently exist. So it helps to streamline the process and consolidate that process. Some of the benefits associated with that include uniformity, a citywide effort to attain commissioners, as well as decreases bias and promotes diversity. So the action that we're requesting from the council tonight is to, 1, adopt the resolution, and then 2, appoint 2 members of the council to serve on the ad hoc committee with the purpose of filling the Infrastructure Commission seats. So that concludes the presentation. Happy to take any questions.
That was a really nice presentation. I want to pick my own guys. I want to pick my own representatives, and I think the diversity is that I have my group of friends and neighbors, and they have theirs, and I think that everybody pools and gets a good selection. Sorry. I would agree with Carly. I would like to continue selecting my own also. I don't know if we should consider the fact that we are now in districts and should choose someone from our district, or if it should stay on a citywide option. I have mixed feelings on that, because there are times when somebody from a different district has really, really, really good qualifications, and you need to look at that. Quite honestly, I have no problem with the policy we currently have, that we are open, that we can select citywide, but that each one of us retains the ability to select who we want
And it still has to be approved by council. I think having maybe an interview, a mandatory interview process with the department head on whoever, is managing, if it's a commission or a planning commission, that the planning director, community investment director be a part of those interviews to get qualified people. But I think I don't even know about that, because if, you know what I'm saying, if you still get to trump whatever. Well, yeah, but at least they
We
can,
have too many meetings
they
around
can
here
throw
for
some
a lot
input.
of, I just, not a meeting guy.
But I think hey, we still have a right to choose, and I think we should maintain that right to select who we want to represent us on these committees. It was a great presentation,
We gathered the input from the council, and I presented what the council provided to me, so.
Yeah, I think what started this is when we were talking about creating the infrastructure commission, and we,
You selected my guy.
well, no,
Bonnie did.
what brought this about is when we first started looking at the applicant pool, and I'm working from memory here, but I think there was only one applicant from one district, and there were multiple applicants from another district, and so that's what generated the whole discussion about, are we limiting artificially limiting our selection options by doing it by district. I totally understand and agree with all of us having the opportunity for input. So I think that's what generated all this discussion and culminated in the very nice staff report by our city manager. So,
Good work.
Can you resend out those draft protocols, please? Thanks.
but I think what, if I'm recalling this correctly, that staff reached out to council with some options, and we were each asked to reply back what our preferences were. And my presumption is that what came before us tonight was the culmination of the input from council.
Yeah, so it's based on the council meeting that we hosted, I think it was on October 23rd, as well as the follow-up emails when we asked council, what do you have to say on this? What's your preference? We need to get this thing moving and squared away. And that was what I presented tonight. And that was the direction the council provided.
And Mayor, I do think that there were a number of council members who had reached out to ask whether, now that the city has officially moved to districts, whether the council members or the city was required to either appoint someone from their district or change at large to, for example, the planning commission has to have one seat is from District 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's nothing in the law that compels you to do that. You can move to that system if you should decide that you want to, but there's nothing that compels you to do it.
No, the sphere of influence is important too. Yeah.
What's your preference?
I think it should be open.
You set up AdComs or not, so.
Well, the immediacy of, we have applicants who have been waiting quite some time, who have shown a willingness to serve on the infrastructure commission.
So do we have a date that's going to start?
No one's been appointed to it.
Well, do we have a date that we're pushing to get a commission in place so that they can then move forward with meetings with city engineer and planning and fulfill their mission?
So the scope of work is identified in when the council established that. As far as I know, there's nothing that's immediately pressing for us to bring forward to the commission. But I know that I had heard, at least from a couple council members, that they wanted to get that commission up and going. And so,
Well, and we're going to get that commission up and going when we move forward on the skate park. street, so
Yeah, absolutely.
Correct.
gotta get done.
Well, I know that, absent any formal process, when we all had the applications that came to us, I conducted interviews with those applicants that were in my district. And so I guess,
I only have one from my district, so,
So we can,
And he's a good one.
so then, can we push to have this
On the next
something
agenda.
going, like, by the end of February?
So it depends on a couple things, what the council direction is on how they would like to select the commissioners. And then ultimately, it's up to each individual council member, however that wants to be divvied up, to interview the candidates and then bring your candidate, assuming it's the status quo, bring that candidate to council for ratification. And at that point, assuming we have a quorum, we're able to set up a meeting, develop the agenda, and then go from there. So it really depends on the applicants that we've received, whether the applicants that are there are individuals that the council would like to individually appoint with the ratification of the council. So it really becomes a question of who those applicants are, how much time it takes to interview them, and then, how we can get them brought to council and assuming they accept the appointment.
Can you resend out all those applications because of the way that they delete inbox stuff?
I was just going to suggest that we get the applicant pool sent back out to council, and we can direct our input.
So here's my concern, because we already went into another direction, because we initially went on the district side. So we didn't,
We had conversation, but we didn't go that.
but,
There's not candidates in our district.
yeah, that's what I mean, you got candidates in our district.
But there's also candidates that are in the dispute.
Do you need a motion?
Yeah.
I move that we establish a new, an ordinance for our picking people for our committees. Yeah, this is a new policy. And that we can, each council member will choose their own candidate from the application pool. Not, what do you want to say, at large, yeah.
So I think that's how it is currently.
Already?
Yeah,
So we
that's
don't
the
need to
status
change
quo.
anything. That's what I was
Yeah.
thinking.
Yeah, that's what
Okay,
I-
perfect. That's what I'm looking. Okay, so then we don't need that.
So motion to
Maintain
maintain the status quo.
Well, that took a lot of time for that.
Yeah, but it was a great presentation.
I'll second
I
that.
wish I could take the credit for doing that presentation, but I didn't do it. I just presented it. So
Okay,
I will make sure that it gets to the appropriate staff person. How's that?
Erica did it.
She did.
I have a motion from Carly and a second by Michael to maintain status quo,
There you go.
and direction to staff to please
We'll
send
provide
the
the applicants.
applicant's information back out to council. Please vote.
Make sure you take your food in the back room.
That motion passes 5-0. Okay, item 11, council and staff reports. How are we doing on time?
I do have something I want to say. Nobody else does.
Same here. I mean,
Okay.
I haven't given council reports.
Councilmember Meyer.
I don't have a copy of it. I've given my reports. Thank you.
Councilmember Percival.
Okay, so RCA was last week, and there's no species of the month, but there is a little bit of a reorganization. So Charles Landry was the previous CEO for RCA, and he had retired at the end of the year. And the deputy CEO, second in charge, Honey, she also retired at the same time. But, and so at the last, or 2 meetings ago, they appointed an interim director, and the interim director is no longer the interim director. He brought forth a recommendation to the board to appoint Honey as the new interim director, and they've the board gave direction to staff to have somebody in place within the next 6 months. So there'll be a new director in 6 months. Honey retired, but she came back to be the interim director.
Interesting. It's funny how that happened.
That's all I have. Oh, I'll be at the League of Cities next week.
Councilmember Wright?
Okay, so, League of Cities Division meeting last night was excellent. Brigadier General Melissa Cohen did an incredible job as commander of the March Air Force Reserve Base. So that was really great. Western Riverside Council of Governments, that meeting was canceled for January. Russ did the Western Community Energy Board. Homeless Task Force, we've already discussed that. And State Plaza Task Force, whatever that's going to be at this point. Charles, I need to meet with you with regards to that so we can reestablish that committee and move forward. And there's one other thing. I don't know. I'll think about it. That's it. Krupa, you're up.
Okey-doke. RCTC is ongoing conversations about the traffic relief plan for Riverside County, which may ultimately result in a 1.5 cent tax measure going before the people in November. That will be decided depending on public input by the June meeting. In the meantime, I think there's lots of information on the website, on Facebook, and just about any place else you look about projects. One of the, I would say the main emphasis that we brought forward from the San Jacinto Valley, Andrew Kosciak and I both sit on RCTC, was that we could assure them that nobody in this valley would vote for any increase in a tax measure unless Mid-County Parkway was a priority and the realignment of Highway 79 was a project immediate. And I will say that on the 79 realignment, it's very interesting. It's the only road improvement in Riverside County that did not end up with an EIR lawsuit. It went through, there was no opposition to it whatsoever, but that EIR will expire probably in the next 5 years. So if it's not built in 5 years, we're back at square one from 1984. There you go. And Ramona Bowl, this Friday is the annual President's Dinner at the Cibola Country Club. RTA is Friday is the annual T-Now Luncheon at UCR, and library meeting is Friday. I will say this last Saturday, the 4th annual Get Your Comics On, third annual, took place at the library, and it was absolutely fantastic. Kathy and I were riding down in the elevator because she was telling me all of these costume superheroes that were around, and I said, I didn't get to see any of them, and the elevator door opens up, and Darth Vader and the whole clan. Everybody except R2-D2 was standing there, so it was kind of cool. And then they directed me in their voices to basically stand still and shut up so we could have a picture taken. I said, oh gosh. Anyway, that is good job, Kathy. That was really good. League of Cities, I will be in Sacramento next Friday. I have been moved from transportation to environmental quality. And the great thing about that was I didn't put in for environmental quality. I said if I have to get off transportation because the day was wrong, I would like to go to housing because that's...
It is environmental.
Yeah. So they put me on environmental quality. There you go. So, and Russ has a similar story, and that's about it.
Okay, thank you. Yes, my similar story is I'd asked to stay on the Public Safety Policy Committee and didn't get that. but I got put on Transportation, Communications, and Public Works
There you go.
Committee.
It's a
So
good committee.
that committee meets on Thursday, so I'll be
So you guys.
attending that on Thursday. The one thing to report on the Western Community Energy Board, they took a vote and selected a chair and vice chair for calendar year 2020. Ben Benoit from Wildemar remained as chair, and Todd Rigby of Eastville remained as vice chair. The board adopted a resolution that adopted the rate schedule that meets the board's goal of customer savings of 2% savings discount by on their total energy bill. So we had a really good presentation that went into a great amount of detail by one of the consultants, but they're very confident that through the alternative sources offered through WCE, customers will be able to achieve a 2%. And the interesting thing about this is going to happen kind of transparently to all electric customers that are currently served by Edison. It's an opt-out situation, so everybody will be transferred over to energy provided through WCE once it goes live, and if they choose not to stay on that, then they need to opt out. So the anticipated launch is going to be sometime in April or May of this year, and customers should begin receiving mailers in the next month. There was a recommendation that to prepare staff that we should probably designate a single point of contact within the city, so that if people get these mailers and they get information, if they have questions, the recommendation was single point of contact with all of the frequently asked questions and answers. And they even suggested that maybe providing a kiosk in City Hall for people that walk in and want more information about that. And so that concludes my report. I agree. It was an excellent division meeting last night. Fascinating, yet brief presentation by the Brigadier General of all the things happening at March Air Reserve Base. Very much appreciated that.
Can I add one thing?
Okay.
Very quickly. For council's agreement, if you agree, AB 213, which was brought up last year in the legislature, which is the re-establishment of VLF fees for annexed cities who have annexed land in the last few years and going forward. It was put into suspense file and has now become a two-year bill. And Assemblywoman Reyes from San Bernardino, it's her bill, and she had asked for support from cities last year who had basically had money due from the state because of annexations they had done. Hemet was one of them in a small area, but some of our surrounding cities had sent in letters of support for this. And if you're in favor, if we could research that and see if the council would send a letter of support on AB 213. Yeah, you probably will. So if that's just something, I mean, if council is interested in having a further report and maybe supporting it with more information, I think we're at that point where the last several annexations have been property owner led and basically no people living there, and the VLF didn't really pertain that much. But who knows, going forward, 40 years down the road, we may be doing something that has people, and it could be to our advantage to look forward and see if we can press the issue. And I know you had some interest in that, so.
If the council would like, we can bring this item to council at the next council meeting and have the draft letter of support and have the council weigh in on that at that point, if you'd like.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. And I also was remiss in not thanking our city manager for bringing several staff members to the